I'll begin this with the bottom line. Regardless of race, origin, or time of existence, humans are fundamentally just animals, shaped by millions of years of primate evolution. What does set us apart from the other creatures, however, is our remarkable cognitive abilities. Our capacity for logical reasoning and problem solving has enabled us to achieve incredible feats, propelling us to the pinnacle of the animal kingdom. As a species, we possess a unique curiosity. We are the only creatures that ask the question why. This innate drive to seek answers has led us to develop a rigorous process of questioning, problem solving, and consensus building, which has been crucial in our progress as a species. This innate habit to know why is a pervasive one that finds itself in everything we do and incentivizes us to strive for more in our endless search for answers. Verifying truth individually is challenging, as some truths can be subjective in nature, so people found the truth by means of consensus. Axioms were discerned based on application and results, with the answer relatively satisfied by this process. Take for example the danger of handling a porcupine. Porcupine quills are extremely painful and difficult to deal with once you've been stuck with one. An old myth once stated that one should be wary of porcupines, as they can shoot their quills at potential predators. Today, we know this statement was untrue, as porcupines disperse their quills by making direct contact with their targets. But even though the myth was untrue, it was true enough to keep the people safe from danger by avoiding them altogether. It produced the intended result of safety despite it being a false observation. People reached an agreement of avoiding this animal because the myth was true enough despite it not being empirically correct. Our curious nature is likely the reason why religion was invented in the first place. Religion has been a source of meaning and truth for humans throughout history. It offers answers to profound questions about the nature of existence, providing a framework for understanding the world and our place in it. By subscribing to a particular religious ideology, people can find comfort in knowing that they have access to knowledge that would otherwise be unknowable. If a religion dictates that sacrifices made to a god will bring rain for their crops, people may choose to make these sacrifices as a way of ensuring a reliable food supply. Even if the amount of rain is not a function of the quality of your sacrifices, the act itself still provides people with a sense of control and purpose. This notion is now also considered to be untrue, but it has utility nonetheless. This same concept can be seen in everyday life as we make sacrifices and invest time and energy in pursuit of long-term goals, such as learning a new skill. Learning to play the piano, for instance, requires us to devote large sums of time and energy in service to the goal of mastering a new instrument. Even if an answer to a problem is only partially true, it's an answer that we would accept nonetheless. For people, it is better to have some idea of how to navigate the world than none at all. It's similar to a famous philosophical argument known as Pascal's wager, which in essence stated that if God is real and I believe in him, then I will go to heaven, and if I don't, then I will go to hell. However, if God does not exist, and I still believe in him, then I won't go to heaven or hell. This argument concerns itself with the concept of infinite loss and gain. If God is real, then heaven and hell are real as well, and you will either receive infinite happiness or suffering based on your choice. So it makes sense to simply believe. And if God is not real, then heaven and hell aren't real either, and you stand to lose very little in the end. Since we cannot verify that God is real, it is logically the most reasonable course of action to believe in God, because you stand to gain everything if you're right, and stand to lose almost nothing if you're wrong. The axioms that guide human behavior and our decision-making are ones that have been shaped by the accumulated knowledge and experience of past generations. The best survival tips are passed on by the survivors, after all. Elders in the community understood by virtue of their experience what was true enough to pass on to the younger generation. These elders served as the first case of local authorities, an authority on a given matter who was found in a localized area. As human society developed, the elders became pivotal in their communities and likely found themselves in positions of governance and leadership. Certain critical roles such as leadership and initial attempts at medicine were delegated to these local authorities. Through their successful tenure in these roles, they became a source of guidance and wisdom for future generations. As a result, the roles themselves became imbued with a sense of authority and prestige, and those who occupied these roles were often viewed as trusted sources of knowledge and expertise. As our lifestyles changed, The process for selecting local authorities changed in turn. Within a society, people were selected for different roles which improved upon a society's efficiency. In some cases, important individuals and families came into leadership and could perpetuate their status in the community through several generations. In other instances, institutions could be erected to serve in this capacity. An example of this system could be found in ancient Greece. Athens, Greece is credited with developing the first system of democracy, a political system where every adult male would cast their vote. The greater sum would serve as the determinant when making decisions. In this system, local authorities were chosen by virtue of their arguments and elected through consensus. The most compelling form of local authority available, however, came from religion. It has played a vital role in shaping cultural and social norms, providing a moral framework for individuals and societies. In service to their faith, priests, shamans, and rabbis gave direction to their people regarding spirituality and morality, guiding them on how and why they ought to act in a certain way. It provided answers where people had the most to lose, the fate of their immortal souls. These local authorities were indispensable to people before the technological revolution, as people were largely constrained by time and distance. There were obviously different regions who interpreted religious texts and governed their cities differently, but with people's limited reach, they had to rely on those who were immediately accessible to them. As society continued to develop and become more sophisticated, people's standard of living improved as well. For some, there was more time to speculate on matters so as to discern the nature of reality. With this change, new local authorities began to emerge, namely philosophy and science. The first instance of philosophy was again found in Athens, Greece, by a philosopher known as Thales. Philosophy was created to provide people with rational explanations for the world, as the invention of mathematics made it impossible to rely solely on religious justification from then on. Over time, the field of philosophy grew and developed, with philosophers from different cultures and time periods adding their own ideas and perspectives. Science, another critical authority that arose, is closely related to philosophy. Both are primarily concerned with the acquisition of knowledge and rely on logic to achieve their goals. One of the key developments that made modern science possible was the invention of the scientific method, a systematic approach to conducting scientific inquiry that involves observation, hypothesis formation, experimentation, and data analysis. This method allowed scientists to test their ideas and theories in a rigorous and systematic way, and it has been the foundation of the scientific inquiry ever since. The emergence of these two new authorities is a landmark in our history, as both fields were crucial in challenging and eventually freeing ourselves from total reliance on traditional sources of authority. Society as a whole underwent several revolutions centered around evolving technology. Some examples include coal, oil, electronics, and eventually the digital revolution. The crowning achievement of these revolutions being the advent of the internet. This completely changed how people viewed and discovered truth on any given matter. All of a sudden, hundreds, thousands, and eventually millions of people were online in communication with each other. People could learn about how other people lived, their histories, and religions all from the comfort of their home. With so many people now within reach, it allowed people to see the sheer variance in opinion regarding so many of life's big questions. Objective truth grew to become more nuanced. People's beliefs splintered as they witnessed the world transition from a land of black and white to one of gray. The internet overtook the world in short order and became a repository for infinite information on every conceivable subject. People could upload their credentials, scientific findings, and opinions from virtually anywhere, and these uploads could be verified almost instantaneously. By this time, science and philosophy had both matured into sophisticated logical instruments used to probe the world in search of answers. Old religious tenets that had once been law became incompatible with modern life. Old truths became fragile in people's handling of them as they tried to derive the same quality of results that we had seen in ages past. At that moment, people no longer needed to rely on their local authorities for most questions. Modern society places a heavy emphasis on education, and the internet facilitated this need. With a few keystrokes and a stable internet connection, people could search independently for answers on any given subject like history and science. Concepts such as evolution and psychology afforded to us by science help to shed light on questions like where we came from and what makes us tick. With empirical evidence readily at our fingertips, most people favored this new resource over the more traditional ones. We could know instantly who was the best person to ask questions of, regardless of how far they lived away from us. However, our new resource also revealed to us an ugly truth. Although people have always lied for personal gain, it is truly egregious when individuals in positions of authority manipulate the truth for their own purposes. In the past, we placed so much of our faith in local authorities as they were there to guide us. We weren't concerned with verification the same way we are today. Our leaders had an easier time deceiving the masses they claimed to advocate for. However, thanks to the internet, we were afforded a new awareness regarding the scope of this issue. Entities could broadcast their message to millions of people, and with so many people watching, someone who knew their statements to be false could chime in, and their dissenting opinion could gain traction overnight. While a higher standard of proof may seem like a net positive effect, it has also created an expectation of perfection that has partially blocked the door to proper discourse. People are still interested in the truth and will fact check what others say, but this research is often hindered by people's limited attention spans, and as a result, they are unable to engage in deeper conversations and debates. This limits our ability to understand complex issues and develop informed opinions. As I mentioned before, we gained a new ability to analyze and verify matters in real time. We could better discern whether or not our political leaders, companies, or individuals were telling the truth. But in addition to verifying current events, people were also able to discern what past statements were made dishonestly. And in the wake of this realization, we see the profound effect it has had on people. This generation is marked by an irreparable distrust of traditional sources of authority. And who could blame them? We've been lied to by everyone. Where we once only had local authorities to look to for answers, there was almost no one who could rebuke the lies that they fed us. So we had to accept these lies as truths, for we did not know any better. We do not believe in anything anyone has to say unless it is verifiable at that very moment through a quick Google search, as if that action could qualify as or replace actual due diligence. We witness retroactively the lies told to us by the government, Catholic Church, food companies, beloved Hollywood idols, until the air of skepticism began to suffocate our rational minds. We turned our back on traditional authorities as we saw how they had mismanaged our faith and trust. Religion is no longer where people look to for answers regarding the true meaning of life and our purpose here. Our reliance on these old sources has faded in favor of more empirically valid ones like those found in science. And yet, even with all of human knowledge at our disposal, these questions still have no definitive answers. Our current understanding of the universe has provided us truths that in many ways are utterly insufficient, revealing a cold and indifferent world that is completely bereft of any meaning or purpose. It's a terrible shock, as prior to these discoveries, people expected our conception to be a miracle expounded from God's own mouth. But now, it is more likely the case that our existence is the result of a careless windfall found in the wake of a primordial explosion at the epicenter of our universe. We appear to be here just for the hell of it, an explanation that some people find difficult to cope with. Religion is currently in a state of decay in the modern West, and with its departure, it has left a gaping hole in so many people's lives. What's become strikingly obvious in the wake of this religious decline is just how fundamental these answers were to a happy life. More than anything else, it gave us peace of mind, as even if you don't understand all the details on why the universe works, what was clear was that by following the path laid out for you, you could rest assured that your actions had meaning, that you have purpose, that the fate of your soul was secured in the afterlife. The big questions about life were covered for you. Regardless of the reason why, people suffer in the absence of meaning and purpose. We just can't stand it. And with the void that religion has left us, countless others have come to try and fill it. As Carl Jung once said, this generation will be the ones that found new gods. Self-help is not a new concept. There have always been those who have attempted to provide prescriptive measures to improve upon oneself. But in the past, these practices were typically relegated to literature, where one would have to visit a shop and purchase a book on such a subject. But now, a quick glance in any given direction will have you confronted by thousands of different sources claiming that they can assist you in that endeavor. Influencers, self-help gurus, and pseudo-intellectuals all promise to have the secrets to solve your problems readily available, and will give you these secrets in exchange for your time, money, and attention. Whether it be the manosphere, red pill, black pill, or even left-wing extremist ideology, people are looking for something to believe in. And while these thought groups aren't inherently religious, the people that fill their rosters bring with them the religious component. They are in search of a structured belief system, an ideology that they can be a part of, one that brings order to the world and suppresses their doubts. In these more divisive schools of thought, you are taught how to behave, a general premise for your thoughts on a given matter, and one, if not many, thought leaders who pioneer and perpetuate the movement. It's case by case, but in the most extreme examples, a person will defend their social or political beliefs with a fervor reminiscent of religious zealots. They will present their worldview as fact, starting at their desired conclusion and working backwards in order to justify it to a dissenting opinion. If they cannot convince you, they will attempt to disqualify your opinion using underhanded tactics such as slander. Truly repulsive behavior. Thankfully, most of these behaviors are only committed by the loudest, most insolent minority of these groups. While some of these online personas may genuinely intend to guide their followers towards enlightenment, their methods prove otherwise. Take, for instance, the self-proclaimed authority like Andrew Tate, who is presently embroiled in a culture war. Not one born of humanitarian or nationalistic motivations, but one that seeks to capture your attention in service to their own myopic ideologies. These self-proclaimed gurus wage their battles in the virtual realm, producing more and more hyperbolic and salacious content in a bid to outshine one another and win your loyalty. So many of these people telling you what to eat, what to believe in, and who to vote for. You would think that with so many helping hands, we would have no trouble at all finding some guidance. But the reality is that the sheer volume of information we face leaves us suffering from information overload. There are just too many clamoring voices for only 2 ears to listen to. The conflicting opinions grow ever louder and more divisive. They proudly confer the tenets of their dogmatic ideologies, a prescription on how to live the good life, while failing to uphold these same tenets that they themselves chose in an act of blatant hypocrisy. It becomes a difficult task to reconcile these disparate viewpoints, for they seem to add more to our disorientation than they do to provide us any sense of direction. This is the damage caused by the false prophets. The only thing that they can truly offer you. A nauseating tempest of voices that only serves to confuse you. The dull roar of white noise. We end up just as lost as we were at the beginning of our search. Weakened further still by every failed attempt, until we begin to wonder if there was ever an answer to begin with. This is the path to nihilism. The rejection of all religious and moral principles. The belief that life is meaningless. And while nihilism does not always lead to despair, it is often the starting point for many. Progress can't be measured and appreciated without a direction to move towards. Upon realizing the futility of life, nihilists meander towards depression and can't help but focus on only the negative aspects of the world. Wrestling in the grip of festering pessimism, they ironically view the state of the world as a moral outrage. They see poverty as a consequence of others' greed, and affluent lifestyles as unearned and superfluous. If life is meaningless, then what is the point to all this suffering? How can we celebrate success at all if misery remains a constant? How do we, in good conscience, justify a happy life with all this in mind? The result is that most people cannot appreciate their lives, feeling locked into a monotonous routine. And worse still, a militant minority may reject the world entirely. If life is suffering with no deeper meaning behind it, then why would we even try? Maybe we should just throw it all away. What is the point of living if there is no greater meaning behind any of this? Maybe we should just reset the board and start over. It's a common trope among depressed men of low status. The perception that life itself is too damaged to save. The desire to flip the board over in an attempt to reset everything and land themselves in a better starting position. To build a new world that they wish to live in, and burn down the ones that they don't. However, this approach is toxic and ultimately fruitless. And new ideologies that have emerged, such as those found in the manosphere, offer little remedy to this outlook. Looking again at individuals from the manosphere, some may find success in their endeavors. A self-identified incel who is depressed about his current status may be angry that life isn't going the way that he wants. When he complains, he will be met with disdain from others as they are not responsible for his situation and aren't interested in entertaining these toxic claims. His resentment fuels his misogyny and hatred towards other men who have the life that he thinks that he deserves. A victim complex develops, as he may believe that opportunities have been stolen from him. He may agree with what the manosphere tells him to do. He renounces his previous self and behavior. He might start hitting up the gym and focus on earning greater sums of money, generalizing the behavior of women as self-centered and superficial. And in the end, he may get what he wants, a woman measuring up to his arbitrary standards of beauty and a life that's outwardly appealing to onlookers. But it won't solve the actual issue. This will only perpetuate the cycle of malice and resentment. This person will become part of what they hated the most in the first place. The issue itself is like a large snake that's been stuffed into a bag. It's hot, and it's angry, caught in a trap that acts only to contain and reflect back at it their growing resentment. The snake, disoriented by its predicament and exhausted from its futile struggle, will eventually swallow its own tail, forming an Ouroboros, and the cycle repeats. I'm not trying to be hyperbolic. I'm just following one possible train of thought to its logical conclusion. And this conclusion isn't limited to the manosphere alone. Any ideology that is built upon a reaction to what is perceived as life's unfair treatment is rooted in ignorance and ultimately doomed to fail. The true remedy lies in finding a sense of direction and purpose in life that allows for a fulfilling existence, one that is not marred by negativity and despair. An ideology that seeks to right the wrongs done to an individual by wronging others will only perpetuate the cycle of injustice. Life isn't fair, and sometimes people are dealt a bad hand, but that's just the way that things go. This is also true for all other living beings on Earth. When a pack of wolves stalks a herd of deer through the forest, the deers are not the wolves' enemies. They simply occupy a different position in the food chain. The deer group themselves together for protection, while the wolves work together to separate any stragglers. During the chase, the wolves look for signs of weakness from sick, old, or injured deer, and appropriately cull the herd. Though it may seem unfair from a human perspective that a deer that has already been wounded is targeted by the pack, this just isn't the case. The wolves aren't motivated by malice. They're simply trying to feed themselves in order to survive. Life takes its course, and everything is as it should be. Nothing was promised to you when you came to be. The universe owes you nothing. You aren't a victim, and there is no guilty party to be found. These are concepts that people devise themselves, and the same is true for the meaning of life. It is merely a question that we asked ourselves years ago, and we assumed that there would be an answer waiting for us. That's the cruel joke of being human. We strive for answers to questions that we aren't built to understand. We evolved to hunt and avoid predation on the Serengeti, not to contemplate the cycles of celestial bodies. Our cognition is a core aspect to being human, and it's this same limited cognition that will keep us from ever truly knowing the answers that we seek. But this isn't necessarily the end of the road for those who ask. It may be the case that life is meaningless and we have no intrinsic purpose, but that just means that we get to decide it for ourselves. We get to choose our actions, and those actions will ultimately determine who we choose to be. After all, we have always done this. We don't need to be told this by God or anybody else. We get to make our own decisions. It may not matter to the universe itself, but it's clear that it does matter to us. If you see someone who's suffering and it moves you, then it is your responsibility to help them. Ultimately, you can only hold yourself accountable for what you decide to do. The way we solve the crisis of meaning is by remembering that we are the ones who asked the question in the first place, and only we can answer it. We can't fall victim to the mistake of serving the institution, its thought leaders, or even the ideology itself, when the whole point is to be serving the people, and our community. It may have been the case before that our communities were limited to those with our shared beliefs, but we ought to know by now that our concern, our compassion, and our love should not be limited to those who share in our belief systems, for it is us who give validity to these systems in the first place. Because, in the end, it's just us. We only have ourselves to talk to. We just have to be brave enough to acknowledge that, Don't blindly give your faith to the institutions or any of these false prophets who claim to have life figured out. Don't allow them to do your thinking for you. No matter how clever, rich, or successful they are, I guarantee you that they are just as frequently confused as you or I am. There is no path to becoming God, at least not one in our lifetime. We can only try our best. We're only human.